under fading skies. Tattered flags waving dreams in our eyes. The crowds roar like a storm on the wind. We're the underdogs fighting again.
What's going on, guys? Good evening. I hope you're doing well on this fabulous Wednesday evening. It is time for another edition of Stateside Footy. And quite honestly, man, I hope you guys are doing well. Man, what a week. What a week and what a show that we have for you guys tonight. Do me a favor and please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and also hit that notification bell. I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't begging for subscribers, right? So, you know, it is what it is, man. If you guys are tuning in on TikTok Live, man, I hope you guys are doing well. The link is in the description. And head on over to YouTube, man. Hook a brother up. You know how it goes. All right. Quickly before I get started, we have Greg 1987, who's in the chat. Good evening, Greg. I hope you're doing well. Robert Lewandowski is making his MLS debut, the R9. Yes, sir, he is. And I don't necessarily know how I feel about Robert Lewandowski in Major League Soccer. I'll get into it, and I hope you're doing well as well, too. I don't necessarily know if I like the idea of Robert Lewandowski. For me, this is a sign that Major League Soccer still does not know its identity. It doesn't know what it wants to be. It almost... like when it feels like it's going down a road, then you have teams reverting back to the mean. And that is Robert Lewandowski, who's 38 years old and conceivably is not going to be around for much longer. They get rid of Hugo Kuipers, who, was a Golden Boot leader for a guy who, I mean, granted, yeah, Robert Lewandowski is a big name, but what I'm saying is that you're using this roster spot for a guy who's unproven in Major League Soccer, for a guy who is definitely proven, or that of a young American prospect who probably should be getting pathways and opportunities in Major League Soccer. And it just goes to show you that the playbook, the short-term game playbook, where a team will do this, will bring in a name for the only reason for A, selling tickets, B, for selling merchandise or shirts, Chicago Fire shirts with the name Lewandowski on the back. And of course, they're trying to tap into the Polish market. I understand the reasoning behind it. I don't necessarily have to like it. And, when people, accuse Major League Soccer of being a retirement league, this is the reason why. Same thing with Antoine Griezmann down in Orlando. Like, why would he go to a team like Orlando? It makes absolutely no sense, right? Sonny going to LAFC. I understand that. It's the exact same reason Lewandowski went to Chicago. LA's got a huge Korean community. And of course, he's a billable name. So again, that means what? Ticket sales, short-term ticket sales, short-term jersey buys, these type of things. When this league had made inroads, had made strides when it comes to young Americans or even young foreign players. They did a very good job of lowering the average age from like 28 to 25 and a half, 26, right? This league went out of its way to get this league younger and to get this league more competitive. And then they go and do things like this. And to be honest with you, I'm just not that big of a fan of it. Again, I hope he does well. I really do. I guess for Chicago's sake, I hope he does well. But is this going to lead Chicago to the promised land? I highly doubt it. I really highly doubt it. Let's see. I know Imagine Old Stars coming over is a negative look, but we get to see them one last time. Yeah, and I guess that is the billing, right? Where you only get to see these guys on TV because they compete in Europe. Very rarely are Americans going to go to Europe to check them out, and so this is an opportunity before they call it a career. But I'm just going to ask you guys this question. Is it worth it if it means that you're blocking talented young Americans potentially, or even younger, better talented foreign players that raise the level of this league? I don't necessarily believe that. So it is what it is. Zlatan was fun and Beckham was very fun. That's true. And I guess that is the high level bar of players that still have a little something left in them. You're going to get a few solid seasons, and towards the last couple of years of Beckham, when LA was actually pretty good, that team was actually, pretty sick. But it is what it is. Let's see. We have Barazin LFG. Hope you're well, boss. Good to see you. I hope you're doing well. I hope you're doing well as well. And of course, if you haven't liked and subscribed yet, I do highly recommend that. Give me 3 tips for games starting now at 7:30. 3 teams to win a bet. Okay, let's see if I can help you out real quick. Let's see. You ask, I shall give you. Let's go ahead and see what we have. All right, so. All right, tonight. So we have Cincinnati versus Vancouver. We have Red Bulls, Philly. We have Columbus, NYCFC, Charlotte versus Atlanta, Nashville versus Montreal, DC versus the Dynamo, Seattle versus Austin, Salt Lake versus LFC, Colorado, San Diego. All right, so the first one is going to be Vancouver on the road versus Cincinnati. Go ahead and take the Whitecaps. Let's see. Let's go Charlotte at home over Atlanta United, and Seattle on the road at Austin. There you go. Those are my 3 teams right there. Boom. All right. So let's go ahead and get into it because, as everybody is well aware now, we are in the news cycle. And other national teams, such as, like the U.S., are in equally interesting predicaments. Of course, England, I know some fans are probably still salty over the semifinal game, but that being said, Thomas Tuchel is going to be there for at least 2 years. Germany gets rid of Julian Nagelsmann. They are turning to Jurgen Klopp, which is absolutely fantastic that Germany still has that pull. It looks like Argentina will actually get a new manager, but that's not going to happen until December. And of course, the United States is still waiting to hear back from Mauricio Pochettino. And, the word is that we should get some sort of news by the end of this week or early next week on his decision. And I think there is a lot of, what's the word I'm looking for? Skepticism that he's going to return because of a potential for the Argentinian job opening up. And so naturally, when you see something of like, there's this old, what's it called? There's this old Instagram post that's circling around right now on social media that he's glowing about the Argentinian national team. It is a dream of his to be that coach. But that being said, the question is he willing to wait around till December in order to make that happen? There's been no absolutely no news coming out of Argentina with Scaloni just yet. But that being said, a decision has to be made. And so tonight we are going to ask that question about who is the absolute fit, the best fit for this team moving forward in this upcoming cycle, because this is an absolutely massive cycle, regardless of what people are going to try to tell you. This is a big one. And when you look at the current national team and its player pool, there is a lot that has to be done. Think of this as an elk or a deer herd. And every single year when hunters go out and do their thing, usually it is some of the older bucks that get cleaved from the herd to make way for some of the young bucks. It is an apt analogy, and I do believe that it kind of fits in this as well too. And not only do the current, I guess you can say the roster, the last time we saw this roster in the World Cup, there is a lot that has to be cleaved from the herd, and you have to make way for some of these new stars that are about to be getting their first caps. But also the evaluation on the players that are still going to be around has to be determined as well. And also those that barely missed the cut for the World Cup. So your Tanner Tessmans, your Aiden Morses, your Johnny Cardosos, Yunus Musa, Diego Luna, Patrick Ajimeng, some of these guys that I think a lot of us assumed were going to be on the World Cup roster and didn't make it. Those also have to be evaluated as well too. And it's not going to be an easy task. And this is not something where you can just say, okay, cool, let's go with this guy. I'm going to start with Mauricio Pochettino because he is the incumbent. And the U.S. Soccer Federation wants him back, and they want him back in a big way. And it's understandable because I think we all saw that Pochettino was indeed a very good fit for the national team. And not only is he a good fit, he seems to have garnered the respect of the players. The question with Pochettino is, okay, fine, so he's a good fit, but is he going to be a good fit for what is going to be required over the next 4 years leading into 2030? It's a very important question because, unfortunately, one does not have to do with the other. You can be a good fit, but if you are not capable of doing the things that need to be done, which is appropriately evaluating the pool, reshaping the pool to the strengths of what the coach needs, but also recruitment as well too. And that goes for dual nationals. And whether we like it or not, dual nationals are now a part of international football. And it's something that when you look out there in Europe, there is still a bunch of dual nationals that could be had for the United States, dual nationals that potentially raise the bottom level of this national team. And of course, everybody points to Noah Kai Banks. But of course, when you look around this team and you see weaknesses at the back four, you see weaknesses at goalkeeper, naturally, you start looking out there to see exactly if there's anybody as far as dual nationals go that are going to make this pool better. And that is something that this is going to be something that Mauricio Pochettino is going to have to do. And he's going to have to do it at an incredibly high level in order to, raise the bottom floor of this player pool. And the question is whether or not he's capable of doing it. Me personally, I believe that he is. And I think we also have to take a step back and understand what he was brought in to do the first time around. And it's going to be completely different from what he was hired the first time around. And he wasn't brought in. I keep banging the drum because it's 100% true. He was not brought in to recruit dual nationals the first time around. That was not why he was hired. He was not hired to evaluate youth internationals or even create pipelines that streamline the process from the youth national teams to the senior team. That's not why he was here. He was hired because the U.S. Soccer Federation said, hey, listen, we have this core of players that we have dubbed the Golden Generation, and we have a World Cup. We want to hire you to get the very best out of this core and make a deep run in a home World Cup. Okay, fine. That's exactly what he did. Now, of course, that deep run only got us so far as the round of 16. Some people consider it a failure. I look at the World Cup and I said, I think there's a lot more positives than there is negatives. And when you just look at the goal tally, we scored 11 goals through 5 games. That has never happened. Compared to 4 years earlier when we only scored 3 in 4 games. So the fact that he was able to cultivate the attack and put it in a position where it can actually have that type of firepower with players that may or may not be rated, I think that is a positive. When you look at the win total, we get 3 wins for the first time ever in a World Cup. We win the group, easily for the first time in a World Cup. And I think that is, all of those things are positives, and all of those things that you can build off of over the next 4 years, without a doubt. Regardless of that loss to Belgium. And the only thing that loss to Belgium told me was that we have a soft underbelly to this national team. That's what that loss for Belgium told me, is that this team is charmin soft. And you can go back to the 2022 World Cup and you can see it then. And a lot of that has to do with the former coach, Greg Berhalter, for cultivating a soft environment where a lot of these players were coddled. And when you look at the whole Gio Reyna debacle, that certainly is, that's proof of concept. When you look at Tim Weah in the 2024 Copa America, coming unglued in a game against Panama, a team you should absolutely know exactly what they're trying to do, and yet you still come unglued. And of course, that led to us getting grouped. And then you look at this World Cup with what happened with Lo Balogun and the fact that it completely eroded the entire locker room. It lets me know that this team is weak. This team is mentally weak. This team is mentally soft. And he has to cleave all of that out. And there's going to be a lot of guys who are no longer going to be a part of the national team, because you can't necessarily have that moving forward when you consider that we have a Nations League to prepare for. We have a Copa America in 2 years to prepare for. We have World Cup qualifying on the horizon. All of that is going to require players that are going to be mentally tough, because most of these guys are going to be coming from Europe. This group still needs to continue to be challenged. And the expectation, there's going to be a new expectation level that this team has to be able to reach. And that's why I think Pochettino is that guy, because he is going to keep guys fighting. He is going to keep guys fighting. And if that means you got to pay him, 20 over 4, okay. You guys have already shown the U.S. Soccer has already shown the propensity that they're willing to pay him. Okay, cool. So if you were willing to give him $6 million a year through the World Cup, there should be no problem with continuing at that level or even higher. Yeah. I probably would agree with that. Belgium had far more talent despite all the noise around Flo in the squad. Yeah, I'd probably agree with that. But what it showed me is that this team has a soft underbelly. And when you need to be strong and when you need to be tough, it's incredibly hard for weak people to be tough. And by the way, that was never our DNA. We had always been a physically strong team. Our history and our lineage, suggests that. And even when we were lacking on talent, we still gave the best in the world a run for their money. I mean, to beat Spain, you can't be soft and be able to beat that version of Spain back in 2009. I always go back to that because that was the pinnacle of toughness when it comes to the U.S. men's national team. Everybody had them counted out, and they went out and did something that, stunned the entire footballing world, because it just doesn't happen. And that is the pinnacle of what U.S. toughness is all about, the identity. And after we failed to qualify in 2018, U.S. Soccer jettisoned the entire team. Even players that still had another cycle left in them. And there was a right way and there was a wrong way to do that. And I know I'm getting sidetracked, but the reality is you need those guys to pass the DNA of the national team along. Even if you cycle them out in 2 years prior to getting to World Cup 2022, where you're going to make way for that next generation, you keep them around for a year or two. You keep them around for a year or two so they teach the young kids exactly what the DNA of the national team is. And that didn't happen. And it didn't happen for a reason. And it was absolutely terrible thing to do because these guys came into the national team for the first time, not knowing what the national team was about, except for Christian Pulisic, who definitely was around. But, Pulisic is not that type of leader. So it is what it is. Anyway, Pochettino in or out? Me personally, I want him in. Greg 1987 says, if they hire Brian Schmetzer, I want Bob Bradley at Sounders. That's a good shout. That's a good shout. Poch to Argentina. I don't know. The thing that makes me think that it's conceivable is there's no good jobs in world football right now. All the good jobs that he would be up for are currently filled. And so you have to ask that question, which comes first, right? The chicken or the egg? Does he wait for a potential Argentina opening? But what happens if Manchester United comes available? What happens if Spurs come available? If De Zerbi flops or whatever the case may be, right? Would he take any of those jobs, or would he hold out for Argentina? That's a good question. But that being said, I look at the things that him and his staff have been able to do. I know that Perez, his second in command, did kind of put out a cryptic tweet or an Instagram post where he was thanking everybody. But that being said, it's like they were instrumental in the hire of Steve Cherundolo, right, for the U23. Pochettino and his staff were very instrumental in getting that done, and you don't do that with one foot out the door. So there is a lot to unpack, and I think it would be beneficial for the U.S. men's national team to keep some consistency. This is a federation that has, in many ways, believed in the 2-cycle head coach. If you go back to Bora Milutinovic, after the 94 World Cup, they brought him back to start that cycle for 98. And when the U.S. Soccer Federation wanted him to be the technical director, and really all you wanted to do was coach, he resigned because they were trying to force that technical director position on him. He didn't want to do it. And he resigned, and that's how we got Steve Sampson as an interim and then a full-time. Bruce Arena was hired after the debacle in 98. He had 2 cycles. After 2010, Bob Bradley was brought back. And then he was let go unceremoniously after Gold Cup to 2011 when the U.S. coughed up a 2-goal lead to Mexico, ended up losing it. And, of course, Jurgen Klinsmann comes in. And then Jurgen Klinsmann was brought back after 2014, and he gets let go in 2017. That's after getting a semifinal in Copa America. That happened, right? And also let's remember that they brought back Greg Berhalter as well, too, for a second cycle. And, of course, he didn't make his way through it. So this federation does have a history of bringing back coaches. For that. They do believe in the second cycle, and they do believe in consistency. The difference between, I think, Pochettino and those guys is the fact that when you look at his club track record and when you look at how expectations change on a year-to-year basis, that message has to change as well, too. Players have to be challenged, and players do not respond to the same old. They have to continue to move forward. They have to continue to be pushed to get the very best out of them. And Pochettino did that at a very high level, not just with Spurs, but he also did it with PSG and for a short time with Chelsea as well, too. So when you're dealing with those type of guys that coach at the extreme high levels, they have to have that ability in their locker. This is nothing compared to some of the jobs that he's had previously, with all due respect to the U.S. men's national team. But, it's on a different level. It sounded like he was giving Pulisic a pass earlier. We should get Guardiola. Yeah, we're not getting Pep Guardiola. Let's go ahead and clear some things up real quick. If Pochettino says thank you, but no. The likes of Pep Guardiola, and from everything that I've been hearing, it's Italy really wants Pep Guardiola and are willing to give Pep Guardiola the bag. And I don't think the United States would be willing to match. I'll just say that, because you're probably going to have to pay Pep Guardiola like $10 million a year. Like, let's be perfectly honest, right? Like, Pochettino is a high-level coach, but then you have the dude that's pretty much won everything. And quite honestly, do you think that he would take on the Italy project, knowing the history and the lineage of what Italy means to the international game, or would he take the bag in the United States to do the United States? I don't. He lives in New York, I guess. Maybe he might consider it, but I don't know. And I certainly don't think Roberto Martinez is going to be available. And by the way, Pellegrino Matarazzo is not coming to the national team. Not yet, at least. And I know that name gets thrown around. But Pellegrino Matarazzo went to Real Sociedad last December, a team that was in the relegation zone, and guided them to a Copa del Rey. And, he became the first American head coach to win a European trophy of any sort. He's not coming to he's not leaving the club game for the U.S. men's national team and dealing with the U.S. Soccer Federation. Not now, at least. I would find that incredibly hard. So your names are going to be like Hervé Renard, the Globetrotter. He's like the modern day Bora Milutinovic. That is he's available. Maybe you can convince Thierry Henry, although TT's been out of coaching for a while, and I don't necessarily think that TT is better than what we already have. To me, that's like the biggest question. Is there somebody, and like that's number one, available that isn't Pep Guardiola, because I don't think he's coming. Now that doesn't mean you don't call Guardiola's people and you ask, hey, Pochettino, I think Pochettino is going to Argentina, or he's going to a club. Would you be interested in having a conversation about the national team job? And if he says yes, okay, you have that conversation. But if he says no, well, at least you checked in. But that for me is like those that are available that are going to be, I guess you can say, open to the idea of coming to the United States. Is that better than what we currently have in Pochettino? And no disrespect to Hervé Renard, he's just not Pochettino. And this isn't me glossing Pochettino. Dude has its faults. But when you look at what he did over his tenure compared to his predecessor and compared to what's out there, you're going to take Mauricio Pochettino over Hervé Renard. You're going to take him over Pellegrino Matarazzo, and you're probably going to take Pochettino over Julian Nagelsmann, who kind of failed spectacularly with Germany. Now you can say that the German system set him up for failure. He didn't necessarily have a striker and blah blah blah. But that being said, it's like he had the same time frame with Germany that Pochettino had with the United States. And say what you will, the U.S. did a little bit better than Germany in this tournament. By all metrics, they did a lot better. But I don't necessarily think that that's something you want to do. If you I get the impression that if the U.S. are going to reset, they're going to go to an MLS coach. That's the impression that I get. I could be completely wrong. Maybe another international coach is something that they want, but I get the impression that they're a little bit more comfortable. They're a little bit more comfortable with either Pochettino because they know him, they trust him, and if they can't get him, they're going to revert back to a U.S. domestic-based coach. And then, of course, you talk about there's a retread. Obviously, Bob Bradley's available. I don't necessarily know if the federation goes back in that direction. He's available, And, when you look at the way, Bob Bradley was dumped the first time around, I'm not saying it's going to be an option. I'm just saying there's the retread. They got they got his young son with the New York Red Bulls and Michael Bradley, although I would question whether or not he's ready for it. I think the U.S. should have learned their lesson with Greg Berhalter, hiring a coach that was not ready for that job. And make no mistake, he was not ready, nor was he qualified to take that job. I think people forget that, he was in the Swedish second division to get his career started, and he was dumped a year and a half in and fired and sacked because his teams didn't score enough goals. He goes to Major League Soccer, takes the Columbus job, and the only tangible thing that they did was win a supporter shield, a Mickey Mouse trophy that means absolutely nothing. And throughout his time with Columbus, they struggled to score goals. And what happened with the national team? How are you? I am very impressed with Spain. Yeah, credit to Spain, man. They're fantastic. Credit to Spain. They were fantastic. But what happened with Berhalter and the national team? They struggled to score goals when it actually mattered. He was dubbed the king of CONCACAF for a reason. Did very well in the Confederation, but when outside of the Confederation, they struggled. And maybe that is not something that you want to do again this time around, is hire somebody that is not ready. Now, for me, if you're going in that direction, there are only two coaches that fit the national team. Two coaches that fit and fit what this team is going to need for the next 4 years. The first guy is BJ Callaghan with Nashville. Now, the thing with Nashville is they really haven't won anything since BJ's been there. Now, granted, a lot of that has to do with the fact that Inter Miami is Inter Miami, and Nashville doesn't spend on the same level as Inter Miami. So you're talking about a different class of player. But even so, Nashville has been extremely competitive in the Eastern Conference, getting to the playoffs. Last year, as a matter of fact, they lost to Miami in the playoffs last year. They did take it 3, but ultimately they ended up losing. The thing that BJ Callaghan has is the fact that he was the former and interim head coach when the Gio Reyna debacle blew up and Greg had stepped away from the national team. He was the interim coach and he did well. They won the Nations League and all of that's fantastic. It seemed like the team was having fun under BJ Callaghan. He knows the U.S. Soccer Federation. The questions that I have about BJ Callaghan is if he's going to be a yes man for the Federation. And there are certain things that I think domestic coaches have to deal with that I don't think a guy like Pochettino is going to put up with. And maybe that is, I don't know, maybe that's a bit naive of me to say, but that being said, I think the U.S. Soccer Federation, when it comes to domestic coaches, especially maybe guys like BJ Callaghan, where they're going to have like this active, this sense of superiority, like you should be grateful that we hired you to begin with. So, if we're asking you to do things, then you better do them. Where Mauricio Pochettino would be like, whatever, dude, I quit. Not the end of the world. He's still going to get hired somewhere else. Where a guy like BJ Callaghan has to worry about whether or not he's going to be hireable again in the U.S. soccer ecosystem. But that being said, BJ Callaghan plays a style of football that's attractive. And it seems like, the players absolutely, were willing to work with them. The question is, in the short limited time that he was there, we never got a sense of whether or not he is up for the task of doing it, handling the full-time job, whether or not he is capable of convincing a Noah Kai Banks that he should play for the U.S. There's that goalkeeper that's eligible for the United States as well, to Hazawa. I forget I'm mispronouncing his name. Anyways, you guys know who I'm talking about. But, is he going to be able to not only recruit dual nationals from outside the country, but also dual nationals that are inside the country that, for all intents and purposes are probably going to be a part of the U.S. senior national team, but they also have different nationalities they can play for. For instance, Julian Hall also is also eligible to play for Poland. Is he going to be able to convince a young kid like Julian Hall that his best interests lay with the United States? It's something that we don't know. But also, is he going to have the balls to play the youth? You know what I mean? Because you would probably think that the first 2 years of this cycle leading into a Copa America, that he's probably going to roll with the guys that we saw in the World Cup. Maybe there might be a tweak here and there, but you would probably think that we would see a lot of Christian Pulisic, Flo Balogun, Gio Reyna, Tyler Adams. We would see Yunus Musa again. You would probably think that would be the play with a guy like BJ Callaghan, because you got to give like as a coach, you got to give yourself some runway, right? And it's going to take time to recruit, and it's going to take time to integrate young players. There's going to be strategic windows where you can do it. Make sure these young players get their first cap, so they're cap tied. And from there, you plot your course for year 2, year 3, right? As we wrap up World Cup qualifying, as we're moving into 2030, it's something that we just don't know. Jay asked, "Do you like the USL?" I do like the USL. I live in a USL town here in Michigan, and let me tell you, Detroit City FC is a fun, scrappy little team to get behind. They're a fun team. They're moving up to the USL Premier in a couple of years, so that's going to be fun. But the other name that I want to talk about is also Brian Schmetzer, who is currently the head coach of the Seattle Sounders. And I think that if they're going to go domestic, that this would probably be the hire. Because of any coach domestically, Brian Schmetzer has won every single trophy there is to win in the United States. 3-time U.S. Open Cup winner. He's won a Supporter Shield, 2-time MLS Cup champion, and he also won the CONCACAF Champions League. The only MLS team to do it is my Sounders. And last year he won Leagues Cup, that Mickey Mouse Summer Trophy. He has literally won every single trophy there is to win. And also, back in the day when he was head coach of the USL Sounders, he also won a couple USL trophies. Like, this dude is a winner. And that is something that, as far as I'm concerned, makes him the most attractive of any domestic base coach, is the fact that, home dude's a winner. And I think with guys that are like competitive winners, comes with an air of respect when it comes to players. Because one of the things that you guys have to understand is that winning is hard to do. And it doesn't matter which league you're in. Yes, like in the Premier League, if you outspend your competition like Manchester City or Arsenal or Liverpool or Chelsea or Manchester United and now Spurs, there's a good chance that you're going to be finishing within the top 5. And if the points are close, then you have as good chance of winning as anyone. And the interesting thing about the Sounders is the fact that since Joe Roth left, the Sounders haven't been spending like they did back in the 2010s. And they've arguably won more while spending less than what they did in their first decade. Now, granted, they won a lot in their first decade. Like, I'm not going to sit here and sugarcoat it. They did. But, I'm just saying there's a level of respect that comes with it, and players will respect it because there's a level of consistency that goes along with it. from the domestic pool to the European pool, that's going to carry something. And his style of play is attractive as well, too, at a high level. His style of play scores goals. His style of play plays defense. And it is something that I think a lot of players will get behind. But again, the same questions apply. Is Brian Schmetzer capable of recruiting and doing it at a high level? Can he convince domestic-based youth internationals to stay with the United States? And again, I think that the question is, like, does he have the balls to play youth? I think that kind of answers itself when you look at the last 5 years and how many pathways were opened up under him in Seattle. And you look at the youth that got a lot of playing time in Seattle, from Obed Vargas to Danny Leyva, now Snyder Brunel. You know, you look at Ozazi De Rosario last year. It's like he's given a lot of young players a lot of runway in Seattle. A lot of it had to do with circumstance because they weren't spending, and there was a ton of injuries. But still, he's given a lot of good opportunities to young players. Reed Baker Whiting is another one, right? Georgie Monongo. So it's like, yeah, he does not have a problem giving youth a run whatsoever. And so from that standpoint, when you're kind of looking at this upcoming cycle in abstract, and you're looking, okay, it's cool. It's like, all right, so we're probably losing 5-6 players out of the starting 11. And a lot of fans want to see those positions either go to the youth that are coming through, or whether it goes, we get a new slate of dual nationals. It's like, okay, cool. You know, you have a coach that will definitely do that. But that being said, is Brian Schmetzer going to carry the water of the U.S. Soccer Federation? Maybe, but he's 65 too. And so he might only get one cycle. And I would probably assume that because he's 65, that he's not going to put up with shit from the U.S. Soccer Federation. I can't imagine, because let's understand that Brian Schmetzer is not leaving Seattle for another MLS job. And I don't think that he's taken a job in Europe, because if that would have happened, it would have happened 10 years ago. I think he might be a little bit too old, maybe a little bit unhireable for Europe. But he is at the perfect age to take over for the U.S. men's national team if it goes in that direction. So there's only two. And understand that I don't think Steve Cherundolo is going to get bumped. I really don't. You know, I think he was hired specifically for the U23s. And unless I will say there's a caveat when it comes to Steve Cherundolo. Unless that option 1, 2, and 3 say no. For instance, if Pochettino says no. And then for whatever reason, BJ Callaghan and Brian Schmetzer say, you know what, we're good. We'll stay with what we got. Maybe. Maybe out of sheer desperation, maybe they bump him up. But I would probably think that those that the powers that be that are in charge of hiring right now, which I believe right now that might be Aguchi Onyewu, I would probably assume that he's got a list that's at least 10 deep. Whether that is also domestic-based players, domestic-based managers, foreign-based managers. Like they're going to sift through their options before they bump a dude like Steve Cherundolo up. Me personally, again, I just don't think he's qualified, and I don't think you can mess around with this cycle. This cycle is going to be far too important. Not only from I guess you can say, how do I say this? From, I guess you can say, righting the wrongs of that Belgium game. You know, to have that wave of momentum with the country and the fans, and then all of a sudden for it to go flat against Belgium, to repair that damage, you know, I don't think they can afford to screw this up. Let's see. We won't make it out of the knockout round with this upcoming talent pool. I disagree. because we're still going to have Flo. We're still going to have Tillman. We're still going to have McKinney. We're still going to have Pulisic. We're still going to have Richards. We're still going to potentially have Jedi. Alex Freeman is coming back. It's like the spine of the team that made up the 2026 World Cup is actually not a bad team. It's going to be getting better in the areas of weaknesses. And it's like when I look at a Kevin Sullivan or a Julian Hall or an Audrey Mehmeti, and I look at potential wingers in Cole Campbell and Matthias Albert. It's like, now granted, in 4 years going into their first World Cup, that is something, to look at. But that being said, it's like when I look at these young players and understand that every single one of them in 4 years are going to be playing in Europe, at least they'll have 2 years playing in Europe before we hit 2030. It's going to make this team a little bit better. It's going to make this team actually a lot better. This is actually this crew, the Xavier Gozos of the world. Like these young kids that are potentially getting their first caps within the next 4 years, this group of talent is probably going to be the best group of young talent the U.S. has ever pulled through into the senior national team. Far better than the class of '99 that had Aguchi Onyewu, Landon Donovan, DeMarcus Beasley, Kyle Beckerman. You know what I mean? Like it's better than that. And that, that was the anchor throughout the entire, 2000s. You know what I mean? So from that standpoint, it's like the upside of this young core is far and away the best that we've ever had, without a doubt. Yeah, there should be a level of optimism because, this is a very, very talented young core. And if it's done right and if it's blended correctly, this team is going to be very good. And of course, you still have guys that didn't make the team that are coming back. So your Aiden Morses, your Tanner Tessmans, Johnny Cardoso, Yunus Musa, Diego Luna, all those guys are going to be back into the fold. And, so I look at 2030 and I look at this young crew. And I know this is going to sound crazy, but 2034, 2038, me personally, I think this is going to be a team that has the potential to break on through to a semifinal. And especially if it comes back, if the World Cup comes back to the United States in 2038, like those guys will be in their primes coming back to a home World Cup. And it's like, imagine, those teams in 2034 and 2038 will be night and day better than 2016. Excuse me, than 2026. But that being said, it's like none of this can happen until we get a coach and in place before the September-October window comes. That has to happen, and it has to happen within the next week because there's a lot of groundwork that needs to be laid because in September, October, we're going to have the friendlies, whether that's against Mexico, Chile, Peru, whatever the case may be, because the next window is the start of Nations League. It's the quarterfinals. And around CONCACAF in September, October, the Nations League begins. The top 4 teams get a bye to the quarterfinals. So the United States, Mexico, Panama, and Canada all go to the quarterfinals. In December, we have Camp Cupcake again, which would be a perfect opportunity to bring in your Julian Halls and your Xavier Gozos and your Kevin Sullivans and all of these young kids to get them into the senior national team fold, get them on the pitch, get them playing, get them caps. And then the next time we see the national team will be in March. And that will be the Nations League semifinals and finals. And then you get into the summer months, and that is Gold Cup And again, another opportunity for the young kids to actually get tournament playing time, which is where you want to bring those kids back into the fold, because Gold Cup is now kind of like a B-side tournament. And from what I'm hearing is that Mexico wants to host it, which is perfect because now the national team is on the road. And it's a good time to blend some of your European talent with some of the young kids. And now you hit the ground running. And if you're strategic about how you use the young kids, you're getting them prepared for LA 2028. And then once you get past 2027 in the fall, then you get to the start of World Cup qualifying. So it's like rounds one and two of World Cup qualifying, or round one, and then the next year in March you have round two, and that should lead into Copa America 2028 and LA 2028. So these next 2 years, man, are vastly important, and the United States literally cannot screw around with this. They have to be able to get this coaching hire correct. And the interesting thing about this is, one of the downsides to Mauricio Pochettino is he's kind of slow rolled this a little bit, and it's made me a little uncomfortable because it's hard to get a good gauge. But that being said, it's like I feel like Mauricio Pochettino liked the American culture. I think he enjoys the American lifestyle, and I think the timing is just good. We haven't heard him flirt with another team, no club teams. We haven't really even heard of him flirt with another national team. That's absolutely important. And I just think that the money's there. I think the situation is good. The question that really comes down to it is, will the U.S. Soccer Federation be comfortable with conceding a lot of power to Mauricio Pochettino? Because in all effectiveness, he's going to be essentially the head coach and technical director. Essentially, that's what it's going to be. And he is going to be absolutely in charge of the entire national team process for the next 4 years, because that's kind of what you're going to have to do. And are you guys happy with that? Are you guys comfortable with that? The last time we did that was with Jurgen Klinsmann, and for a good chunk of that time, I think he did a very good job. He kind of revolutionized the youth process, and he got good results in the process. That is going to be the mandate for Mauricio Pochettino. Is okay, cool. If we are going to concede some power, you better be able to win some trophies. And of course, that's Nations League, Gold Cup. We have to get and I hate to say this because it doesn't necessarily do much for the national team, but that being said, it's, we have to get back to dominating the Confederation straight up. We have to be able to do what we did back in the early 2020s, which is dominate this Mickey Mouse Confederation trophy. Let's see. I have to say something. Florian Balogun only came to you because he couldn't make it in the UK. Yeah, but to say that, you're diminishing that guy's talent. And Flo Balogun is extremely talented. And I would probably assume that because there's 3 teams in the Premier League that are desperate for a signature: Everton, Sunderland, and Leeds. But what I will say is that, not every single prospect is going to develop at the same rate. Some guys take a little bit longer. But what you do have to admit with Flo Balogun is that he bet on himself. He got away from Arsenal because he needed to make sure he kept his career on track. And he went to Monaco and he bet on himself. And he succeeded. He absolutely succeeded. And he had himself a very good World Cup as well too. And now that put him on the international level. And it wouldn't surprise me if he ended up at Leeds, Everton, or Sunderland, one of those three teams, and he's back in the Premier League. Let's see. Liga MX dominates the CONCACAF championships. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. That's a different conversation for a different game, different day. But you're absolutely right. Let's see. But the point I'm making is, do you see yourself as a second option? Do you want players like that? Yeah, I do. Because well, here's the thing. I will say it depends on the position. It really does depend on the position, right? Like when we got Flo Balogun, it's because our striker depth was not great. Going into 2022, that World Cup, our starting striker was Josh Sargent. Like our three strikers for that tournament were Josh Sargent, Jesus Ferreira, and Jordan Morris. Those were our three strikers in a World Cup. And we left Ricardo Pepi behind because at that stage he wasn't ready, apparently. 4 years later, you have Flo Balogun, who's in his prime, Ricardo Pepi, who's getting into his prime, and all of a sudden, a position of weakness became a position of strength. So you tell me. So yes, I do, and it depends on. So it depends on the position. Well, Flo Balogun, by the way, was born in New York City, so he's American. So, I don't know what to tell you. Now, granted, he grew up in London. For all intents and purposes, you can say that he's English. Okay, he was born in New York City, though. So, I don't know. Yeah, because maybe he wasn't ready to kind of get elevated into the English national team side. Maybe that was the reason. He just wasn't good enough at the time. And by the way, the question is like, if he was good enough to make England, do you think he would have chosen England over the United States? 100%. He probably would have. I'm not going to deny that, but understand that he was a little bit of a late bloomer. But you got to give him credit because he developed, and he developed incredibly well. Do you think the MLS will ever develop into a top tier league? In my opinion, it depends. It depends. It depends on a few things. And now a lot of American fans will say that we need promotion and relegation. I don't necessarily agree, although I am a pro-rel guy. I don't necessarily think it's necessary in order for MLS to get better. What MLS needs to do is they need to raise their salary cap to a level that still allows. Give me 1 second. Major League Soccer needs to raise their salary cap to a level that makes everyone happy, that allows teams to be able to spend while still giving owners an opportunity to make profit, right? We're at a point now where most of these teams are profitable and they're doing a very good job commercially. And you have a lot of owners that really do want to spend. And so if Major League Soccer were to raise their cap to like 20 million, I think you would see the level of competition rise. One of the biggest problems right now is because of the DP rules, most teams spend their big money on strikers, cams, and wingers. And what you've created is a very huge differential between attacks and defenses. And because most teams will spend most of their money in order to score goals, they don't leave themselves enough to really build out defenses. And so you have very good attacks going against very weak defenses in Major League Soccer, which is why you see like an average scoreline of 4-1. And so really what needs to happen is that cap needs to go up and teams need to be able to build depth and be able to build defenses. And you would see a far more competitive league. We'll see what happens. But yeah, it easily could. It easily could be. It easily could be. But as of right now, it's like Liga MX is just a little bit better. Would you really move to Leeds, Everton, or Sunderland, where realistically you never qualify for UCA? Well, here's the thing: if they don't spend and they don't bring in those players, they're never going to have a shot at Europe to begin with. right? Yes, you can stay at Monaco where you're playing in the UCL, but if you move to Leeds, Everton, or Sunderland, you're going to three teams in the Premier League that have stabilized in the Premier League, and now they're looking to climb the table to get into Europe. And Sunderland are in Europe this year. Everton, well, Everton's Everton. And Leeds is back in the Premier League after a while out. But at least they were able to stabilize and they stayed up. But definitely they need to get better. If it were me, I'd go to Sunderland. That's just me, because you're going to a team that's being aggressive and they're looking to do very good things. That's the difference between Sunderland and a team like Everton or Leeds. With Everton and Leeds, you question their ambition. And what makes Everton even more of a head scratcher is they just moved into their new stadium. You would think that their revenues would have at least doubled to a point where they would be a little bit more active to try to make that team a little bit better. Sunderland, at least, Sunderland's not afraid, to spend. But that being said, it's like, if things fall apart, the fallback is you're at Monaco and you're playing in the Champions League. What harm does it do to spend another year in Monaco? It's right. Yeah. They're in the conference. Okay. It's still Europe. But, I think Sunderland are in the Europa this year. I think so. So anyways, you guys let me know. Is there a head coach out there that you guys like for the U.S. men's national team? If it's not Mauricio Pochettino, definitely leave your comments in the definitely leave them in the comment section. Let me know exactly if there is a guy out there that you absolutely love that you think is gettable. And let's be realistic about it, right? Because we're not getting Pep Guardiola. We're just not. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that I just don't think that Pep actually just wants to come. I guess that's where I'm at. I just don't see it. I can see him going to Italy. I really can. That is a proper challenge for a coach like Pep Guardiola. Get that team moving in the right direction and getting them back to where Italians feel like they need to be. I can see him potentially doing that. And I think Italy would absolutely back up the Brinks truck for a dude like Pep Guardiola, where the U.S., I think they have a limit on what they're going to be willing to spend. And I think Pochettino probably just might be that limit. But then, again, there are those international coaches like your Hervé Renards and your Thierry Henrys, maybe Roberto Martinez, maybe a Julian Nagelsmann. But I get the impression that if it's not Pochettino, then they'll go back to a domestic-based coach. And if that's the case, then there's only two that are 100% qualified for this job, that 100%, could potentially do the job. And that's BJ Callaghan of Nashville, and that's Brian Schmetzer of Seattle. And if you ask me which one of those two I'd rather have, Brian Schmetzer 100%, because you can point to his trophy case. And 100%, that dude is a winner. And I think that carries a lot of cachet because he's won every goddamn trophy there is to win in the United States. And that's far better than Bruce Arena. That's far better than Bob Bradley. Far better than Greg Berhalter. Let's be honest, even far better than Jurgen Klinsmann. He is a decorated U.S. head coach. And I think now would be the time to if you're going to pry him away from Seattle, now would be the time. And I think that's the only job he leaves Seattle for is the U.S. men's national team. So Brian says, Kukurea. Last question, Poch's decision to play freeze and Captain Ream, but at the same time, the U.S. can't do better than Poch. Poch's decision to play Freeze, well, Freeze is the best shot stopper of the group. Maybe his footwork sucks, but that can always be fixed. And Captain Ream. But at the same time, the U.S. can't do better than Poch. I'm sure if the U.S. were fully committed, of course they could do better than Poch. Yeah, I don't think the U.S. are really all that committed. Like, I don't think they're going to be that committed, to give $15 million a year to a dude like Pep Guardiola. I do not see it. I think there is a limit to what they're willing to pay, because they would have to do the exact same thing for a dude like Pep that they did with Pochettino, which is get their sponsors involved to make sure that he gets paid. But if Poch moves on, would you like or dislike to see Gareth Southgate? I don't know. That's a good question. See, that's the thing, is I like Southgate. I may be one of the crazy ones that, I looked at Southgate's record, and he did far more better for England than a lot of England fans give him credit for. So there's that. Do you call it soccer or football? I call it both. When I'm with my English friends and Irish friends, I call it football. And when I'm here in the United States, talking with my friends over here, I call it soccer. It's both. There's no point getting Poch. He needs world-class players. It won't even help. Poch is the right level where he's an elite manager, but can still work with some mid players. I think it's a great fit for Pochettino. I really do. I think the U.S. men's national team is a fantastic fit for him. He's going to have to be able to recruit dual nationals to raise the bottom floor. That's without a doubt. And there would be an absolute new mandate for Pochettino. And again, when Pochettino was hired the first time around, it wasn't to recruit dual nationals, and it was not to play the youth. It was to win with what the Federation deemed was the golden generation. If you don't want Poch, you are wrong. See, that's the thing, is I actually do want Poch. I think Poch is the best fit for the national team and the best fit for this cycle. Because here's the thing, right? Not only do I want the consistency, but I want Pochettino to reshape the player pool to his strengths, to his profiles, and let him have carte blanche with these young youth internationals, with making the tough decisions on players that are essentially soft. Because again, that loss to Belgium, the only thing it told me was that this team is soft. And that is reinforced with everything that's happened over the last 6 years. So from that standpoint, it's like, that's the dude that I want, because the expectation levels are through the roof. And because he's taken the power away from the players are going to have to be able to meet that. And I don't think that they bought in until, late. So that's just where I'm at with it. So that's going to do it for me, guys. I do want to say thank you. This upcoming weekend, I start my Premier League coverage, and of course that's going to be on Saturday, as Dave Harris of the Irish Hotspur will be joining me as we discuss our beloved Tottenham Hotspur, as we essentially get set for the, I guess you could say, the bulk of the preseason, and we talk about incomings and transfers. On Sunday, it is another episode of It's Football, Not Soccer, as I'm joined by the great Dermatron as we discuss all things football. And I think we're going to have a conversation about whether or not the Football League needs to let the National League have another automatic promotion spot. When you look at the last couple of years of the National League, the fifth tier, clearly teams have gotten better. So is this an opportunity to hand over another automatic promotion spot? I don't know. I got different opinions on it because by the way, I love the lower divisions in England. It's actually my favorite, and I absolutely love the conference as well too. There's something about non-league football that I absolutely love. So anyway, we're going to get into that discussion. So please do me a favor. Make sure you hit that like and subscribe button. Also hit the notification bell. And if you guys are watching on TikTok. The link is in the description, so head on over there and hit that subscribe button so I don't have to continue to beg you guys for subscribes. Although I kind of enjoy it, though, so it is what it is. So, all right, guys, that's going to do it for me. I will see you this weekend. And, of course, we're going to have a live stream this weekend as well, too. So that should be fun as well, too. So plenty of going on the channel this upcoming weekend. Again, please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button and also hit the notification bell. Good evening, guys. Take care.
Rusted goalposts under fading skies.